with a substantial game 1 edge, and then David with a slight edge in the post-board games. If David is able to steal game 1, he becomes a huge favorite because he gets to drop all these removal spells for duresses and other high-impact cards in the sideboard. But Joe should be a huge favorite to win game 1, especially on the play.
One thing you will notice there for David Daniel, you see the label of his deck, Mono Black Devotion, not Black-Green Devotion. That's important, as I think if he was Black-Green, especially because Lossett does have Detention Sphere, he'd be a favorite in this match.
For sure. If you have Abrupt Decay, that's a huge upgrade in the matchup over things like Bile Blight, Ultimate Price, 4 copies of Devour Flesh that basically have no utility game 1. But David going with the Tired and True Mono Black build causes him some percentage points in this matchup.
Lossett with a couple copies of Temple Enlightenment to begin. Daniel's going to lead off with a Pack Rat. We've seen this kind of sub-game before against Blue Eye Control. It's not something that you can really move in on because of Detention Sphere and Supreme Verdict, but you can kind of pick your shots a little bit.
It's changed a little bit now because some of these blue-white lists have moved away from Detention Sphere altogether for planar cleansing. So in those matchups, Pack Rat goes from your worst card to among your best. And we saw, David Betcher beat Reed Duke in the Invitational last week, and a large part of that had to do with Reed's particular build.
Daniel going to play a Thoughtseize to lead off here. Wants to get a good look at Lossett's hand. And Lossett says, I don't think so. It'll be time to dissolve. Keep the shields up. A little scry action here as well. You see Lossett does have a Sphinx's Revelation that he feels is worth protecting in his hand. It looks like Pack Rat's only going to come across here for 1. So I've got a feeling here that David Daniel does not have a 3rd land to play.
If David is Thoughtseizing that turn instead of making a rat or doing something else with his mana, it's a really good bet he has no 3rd land.
Lossett does draw. You saw the Dissolve take care of the Thoughtseize. Let's see if Joe's anything to do on this turn. Looks like it's just going to be a Hollow Fountain. Coming to play tap before pass and turn back over to Daniel. See the Underworld Connections in his hand. See if he can find a 3rd land. It's a Mutavault. That's a pretty important one.
Yeah, a 3rd land and the best land.
In this situation, absolutely. Going to start by attacking here for 1. Maybe an Azorius Charm? Sure. That'll put that right back on top. That'll slow down the beatdowns. And now Daniel is probably going to have to take a turn. I felt maybe to cast Underworld Connections, but going to go with Lifebane Zombie instead. Is that going to show the hand here of Elspeth, Sphinx's Revelation, a Jace, and a Detention Sphere? Pretty good hand.
David perhaps feeling here that Underworld Connections is a little slow to the table, given where the game's at. And there's a very good chance that Joe can't counter it, and he can just set it up for next turn.
Lossett going to draw a card. It was a land added to the hand in the Plains. I have to imagine he's going to cast a Jace on this turn. There is the potential for a Sphinx's Revelation, or even a Detention Sphere. But Jace taking up seems like a pretty good turn.
Not bad here. It is protected. David with only 3 points of power in play from a Jace plus here.
Now, of course, a little bit risky because you do open yourself up to Hero's Downfall, but that's 1 less Hero's Downfall that can take care of the Elspeth.
Yeah. And with Joe, with Elspeth in hand, I don't think would mind the trade necessarily.
So, Jace will go down to 3. This will be an Underworld Connections on a Swamp. And you saw Joe with good use of that Azorius Charm there. Lossett will draw a card here. It's another copy of Sphinx's Revelation. Wouldn't be surprised to see Jace take down now.
He needs lands.
Yep.
Big time. He's got the tools to win the game. Certainly Chaining Revelation is very good against Mono Black, especially game 1.
Looks like maybe it's just time for a Detention Sphere. Get that Underworld Connections off of the table. Lossett does not have any interest in letting his opponent draw an extra card here. So he may take a slower approach and just take up Jace again this turn.
It's a lot of discipline if he takes up Jace.
We're going to see where it's going to go, and it's going to go down. So here is 1 in Dissolve, 2 in Sphere, and 3 in Mutavault. And it's going to be Sphere versus. I think if you're set, you got to love the other. You got to love the 2 pile.
This is the first real stumble that I've seen from Joe in this tournament. If he was going to minus the Jace, I think he should have done that before casting the Detention Sphere.
I agree with that.
That informs the piles. It informs what he wants to take.
Let's see if this is going to be the split here. If this is the split, if I'm in Lossett's position, I love the Mutavault plus Dissolve. I have the mana to cast the Dissolve.
Yeah, you get to protect yourself next turn and then resolve Elspeth next turn or Sphinx's Revelation, depending on what the board looks like.
Yeah. That's exactly what Lossett's going to take. So Detention Sphere is going to go to the bottom. Mutavault and Dissolve are added to the grip, and now Dissolve is at the ready. So Daniel will pass the turn back. Yes, he will get to take care of Jace, but he's in some trouble here.
There's a lot of Jace minuses that are just whichever 2-card pile it is, that's what I'm taking.
Yeah.
That felt like one of those.
Daniel going to start here with Lifebane Zombie and a Jace we go. So the Architect of Thought is going to bite the dust. See if Daniel wants to cast a spell into the jaws of this Dissolve.
It's really tough, right? Because you don't want Joe to be scrying in this spot. But
No.
it seems unrealistic that he's going to be able to put together 2 spells in 1 turn. So maybe you just had to bite the bullet and throw out a Desecration Demon, for example, out there and acknowledge that it's not going to be good for you, but you got to start somewhere.
There's a Swamp. And will Daniel run a Desecration Demon or World Connections? Or I guess a Pack Rat would also be acceptable. It looks like it's just going to be a Demon. See if Lossett still wants to counter this.
It feels like the worst card in the hand.
Yeah.
So if he's willing to just play into the Dissolve this turn, that seems to me to be the card to do it with.
Lossett going to leave that top card on top. He's going to untap here. 7th land would be pretty big, and it's an island. So there is the 7th land, and that'll allow him to rev if he'd like, or just cast an Elspeth, but I feel like revving is probably the best play this turn.
Yeah, no rush.
In for 3 comes Daniel. Lossett's going to go down to 16. This is an Underworld Connections on a Swamp. And I believe that's going to resolve, and it will, but Lossett's going to go up to 20 here in a moment, but more importantly, 4 brand new cards coming.
And Underworld Connections is David's best game 1 card. Maybe Thoughtseize is slightly better, but Joe is going to be able to easily outpace it here with his Sphinx's Revelation.
So 4 cards coming there for Lossett. Back to the original 20, and a whole bunch of cards in hand as well. Really, really good start here for Joe.
And it's interesting how things have gone full circle here. Now we have Joe back playing a classic blue-white build with numerous attention spheres, playing against a mono black list with no ways to blow them up. Sometimes the metagame just kind of circles around until you're back at high noon.
Been here before. We'll be here again. It does feel like we are at square one. There's the Temple of Enlightenment. Time to take a look. That top card goes to the bottom very quickly. Maybe time to play a Jace. Or Elspeth wouldn't be so bad in this spot either. And it looks like the Sun's champion is going to come to play. Lossett opting to go with win conditions this weekend. We saw Reed Duke last week in the Invitational make top 8, just having Jace, Elixir, and a couple of Mutavaults to get the job done, but Lossett opting to use Elspeth and Aetherling to get the job done.
Joe's list, no copies of Elixir, just 2 copies of Elspeth, 4 copies of Jace, and 1 Aetherling to try to win the game with.
I think it all depends on what you're comfortable with.
Trying to win in time, too. I think sometimes the clock's a big factor.
I got to agree there. Here's an Underworld Connections activation. Daniel going to draw a card, try to catch up on cards here. Mutavault's a pretty important one.
It's hard to catch up on cards, not only against Revelation, but so many of Joe's cards, like Elspeth and Jace, for example, are also worth numerous cards.
Hero's Downfall going to bite the dust. Life-Bane Zombie going to come in unimpeded and due to Intimidate. Lossett going to untap that mass of lands, take a draw here. It is an island, so working his way towards his 2nd Revelation at this point.
And the other problem with all of this is eventually he finds his Aetherling, and then at that point, it does not matter how many extra cards David has found. And because of Jace minuses, putting cards on the bottom of the deck, there's no way it's the last card. It comes up at some point if the game goes long enough.
There's a Mutavault. And we will see what ends up happening here. As we are told very quickly here that Kevin Rand with mono red aggro up a game over Nathan Calvin playing Black Green Devotion. Not too much of a surprise there.
And with the ability to sideboard into 4 copies of Searing Blood against the Life-Bane zombie build of the deck, I think he's in a really good spot.
Here is a Jace. This is how Lossett will start things. Ticking up.
So far, David's drawn surprisingly little straight creature removal. It's helped him keep himself in the game so far.
He's actually drawn his cards that matter for the most part.
Yeah.
A couple copies of Underworld Connections. Desecration even not great in this matchup, but it is a threat that Lossett actually does need to care about. It looks like Lossett's going on the offensive, firing up Mutavaults. And one of those can't attack, but one can, as I believe Lossett played one of those Mutavaults this turn. So it'll be an attack here for 2, 3, 4, 5. Daniel going to go down to 13. Looks like we're going to take an aggressive approach.
Well, his hand is just a Revelation. not a lot to be done here. If David wants to commit a lot of resources trying to fight Jace, I'm sure Joe's happy with that, just cracking back and revelating if the game ever bogs down.
Yeah, the thing I always get scared about as a player when playing, these Revelation decks is, a Thoughtseize comes rolling off the top, you take the Revelation, then you're stuck in this plan.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's really scary.
Well, Joe had a good turn to do with his mana. The Jace gives him a good hedge.
Daniel has not activated connections just yet.
And the life total is a real resource in this matchup. If Joe can kind of finagle the game a certain way, then all of a sudden, maybe he can't be as liberal with these underworld connections and so forth.
And for 3. Well, I can actually just make it 2, of course, because of Jace's triggered ability, so we'll go down to 3. And now here's a pack rat. Just a passing of the turn with the ability to make a rat. So Lossett may have to put on the brakes a little bit here as he draws another land.
I think now he has to go digging, and if he doesn't find anything of significance this turn, you're going to see the revelation you alluded to. But he has flooded out a little bit here.
Rev will have to undo that along with Jace's minus, presumably. Good cards to undo it with, that's for sure.
Yeah. And Joe can only go down so far this road of spending his resources attacking with Mutavaults while David has mana up because, again, he does have the main deck removal spells, and Joe is loath to let David do anything of substance with those cards.
In we go. 3 damage going to be dealt. Truth be told, Joe may have snuck some damage through there.
Well, if he has a Verdict in hand, it's one of those spots where maybe he's bluffing, but David can't call. I mean, he can't make a token there and block because if he does have Supreme Verdict, it's so bad. He can't just put Pack Rat in front and trade with a token because that's no good. So it's one of those spots where both players know what's going to happen, even though there's some chance that Joe's bluffing. It's just too risky for David to call.
There's an island. So it's a big rev on the way if that's what Lossett wants to do.
I mean, I think if he's attacking with those tokens here, he's going to be firing off some sort of sweeper or at least a removal spell this turn.
And Jace, it wanted to tick down, but didn't want to tick up. Now it's just going to stay calm at 3 again. Not quite sure what he wants to do with it just yet.
And no surprise here to see this from Joe.
Yeah, not too much. There's a Vert to clean things up a little bit here. Some soldiers are going to bite the dust. Pack Rat and Lifebane Zombie out of the way. See if he wants to tick up or tick down. It's a tick up with Jace, which I do like. He's already played a land for the turn, so he passes the turn back. And at worst, if he gets Thoughtseized, can Revelate for 3. But that is a concern here, as Daniel does draw a Swamp for the turn.
Although David needs to be concerned about his life total. I mean, he's at 9, he's, presumably falling to 8 here from this Underworld connections.
There are Mutavaults out there for Lossett.
Absolutely. Turns Aetherling into a one-hit kill, potentially.
4 mana. Desecration Demon, perhaps. So Daniel wants to sequence his turn. I believe if I was in his spot, my preference would be to start with Underworld Connections, just to work with the most information possible.
Unless he already has committed all of his mana. But
Yeah.
even still, drawing a card in this spot seems too good to give up.
Oh, there's Deso Demon. Daniel has not played a land yet. Could play that Temple of Deceit if he'd like. Could just go with a normal Swamp instead.
I do agree. Unless he has all of his mana committed this turn, then I would have tried to draw with connections on the main phase.
Yeah.
Because if you find Thoughtseize, maybe you're better served playing a Swamp into Thoughtseize instead of your Temple and passing the turn back.
It's all about working with as much information as you can find before coming to your decisions.
It was the same critique I made of Joe a few turns back. If you have a Jason play, you're going to minus it. See what happens first before committing any resources to the board.
Well, Lossett looks like he's going to get to untap here. See if he wants to fire for Rev for 3 or not. And if I'm Joe, I don't want to use that for 3. I want to use it for much more, but he will fire for 3.
I would have been a little greedier with this, I think. I feel like I would have just untapped, minus Jaced, took my lumps, you know, if I didn't find anything of note, and then read for the full amount.
Yeah, there's just no guarantee that you're going to rev into another rev. I mean, there's a chance that you rev into garbage. And, you know, the 3 cards that he did find weren't that great, but he did pick up a copy of Sphinx Revelation for the draw step.
And I think he may have found his Aetherling too, in which case this game shifts in a whole new direction.
That's been known to change things. Especially if Daniel activates an Unroll Connection, then it becomes a one-shotter. Well, there's your island. So Lossett does play his land for the turn. We're gonna organize some things here. Still hasn't used his Planeswalker yet.
The one Aetherling does not look, you know, it's one slot in a deck that periodically plays one-ofs. Doesn't look like it necessarily means very much. But there's a lot of matchups that play differently as a result of it, especially the slow ones where you see your entire deck. This is a premier example of that.
Elspeth versus. See the second I consult the grip. And you're gonna go, well, it goes reaching for Dissolving Temple of Silence, but maybe reconsidering his options.
If his plan shifts now to Aetherling, I think I'm taking the Dissolve pile.
Yeah, if Aetherling is in his hand, give me the counterspell.
Yeah.
Makes life really easy. The question is, does he want it?
Elspeth's plenty attractive here too. I mean, this is a split where it's hard to go wrong. But I think the odds that Aetherling just kills him is too high. And so, you know, I like this selection from Joe.
Yeah, Dissolving Temple. Go to the grip, Elspeth to the bottom. And now I think it is time to deploy Aetherling, and there it is. Again, Lossett has already played his land for the turn, but the shields are certainly up right now. Daniel's going to go down to 8, which is exactly where Lossett wants him. That means that Aetherling will be one shot. You see a Bile-Blight to draw there for Daniel.
And Joe with just so much protection for this. Mana-wise, cards in hand. He's not even in any threat of getting damage race at this stage as well.
Nope. Desecration Demon Trigger will be placed, on the stack, and it will come down and take Jace. And this is an activation. Daniel going to go down to 7 here. Draws a copy of Mutavault. Hasn't played a land yet for the turn. As you mentioned, Aetherling does change some things. See, Daniel going to organize the mana here.
It's one of the most powerful cards you can have in a slow matchup. And in a slow matchup, you're going to probably see your one copy.
There's Pack Rat. You have to imagine Lossett doesn't care too much about that. And Daniel will pass the turn back with the ability to make rats and do other things. Lossett will draw a copy of Jace, Architect of Thought for the turn.
And it seems like one of the spots where it's just going to be, you know, Joe presents lethal. David has to defend himself. Joe will blink out and then proceed from there.
Yep. Does have a Supreme Verdict at the ready. So you see Joe set the island aside to make Aetherling unblockable. 3 pumps. Would be a lethal attack. The ability to blink out, the ability to wrath, and still have the ability to, of course, still have mana to use Aetherling again.
And Joe a comfortable 20 life.
So that's going to go reaching from some mana. It's time to pump up the jam. So there is your 7. And here will be your removal spell. It's going to be Bile-Blight. Card doesn't have much use in this matchup. Some corner cases with Elspeth tokens and staving off an Aetherling.
Joe contemplating fighting over this. Feels unnecessary, but he may feel like David is vulnerable in the spot. He just wants to finish off the game.
Yeah, even if you're sensing some weakness here, and you're right, you know, by dissolving this. Again, I would much rather just play it very safe, pay the island, blink it out, and just proceed forward from there.
Yeah. The risk-reward assessment probably is not in favor of Joe making any sort of push here.
And so that will blink out. And now Lossett, of course, has not played land yet this turn, so he could very easily just cast Supreme Verdict, clean up these dorks. Aetherling will come back in with enough protection. And I imagine that's what we're going to see. There's your 4 mana. There's your Verdict. So bye-bye Deso, bye-bye Pack Rat. And Aetherling will come back into play in just a moment. And that'll do it. So, David Daniel will untap. And it's time for him to take a draw, sitting at 7 life, draws a swamp. Down to 6 he goes. And again, these Mute Vaults become real threats now, too, as there's a pack rat.
And David, oddly enough, has found basically no removal spells this game. Normally a good thing, but it doesn't even give him the hope of racing this Aetherling, because I don't think he can even force Joe to blink it out.
Yeah, I don't think there's a removal spell over there. Yeah, and he realizes it, just like you did, and that's going to do it.
Yeah, kind of an odd game there, but Joe and his main deck Aetherling taking it down.
Truthfully, that seems how game 1 goes a lot of the time. You know, it's just kind of a grind out affair, but, you know, blue-white seems very favored in game 1. Now, of course, things do change drastically after sideboard.
Well, the Aetherling to me is a big deal because
I agree.
Game 1, Mono Black, maybe with Heroes Downfalls and Bile Blight can make things tough on Elspeth. And if that's your only way to win, sometimes that can be not enough. I've even seen blue-white players get decked some percentage of the time in game 1. But the Aetherling puts a real stranglehold on what game 1 looks like.
And that's why the set was able to take it down with the power of the 4/5 on the ground. We will do trivia right now. I will let you do what you do, which explain the rules, and I'll fire away a quick question.
All right, so I'm just going to ask you a question. Tweet your answer at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium. Of the correct responders, one will be selected at random for 3 free months of Star City Games Premium. It's not a race, so just get it in accurately. Don't worry about getting in first. And please keep in mind that this trivia giveaway is run at the sole discretion of StarCityGames.com, and that Twitch is in no way affiliated with any giveaways on its stream.
Pretty simple one to start off here this evening. Plenty of trivia to give away over the course of the next day or so. But the question, pretty simply, Joe Lossett really trying to climb up our Player of the Year leaderboard. The question is, right now for Season 3, what place is he in on our Season 3 leaderboard? And if you can, name what place Joe is in right now. Hashtag the answer, SCG Premium. Make sure you are following at SCG Live, and we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our quarterfinal round.
And to clarify, that's the total leaderboard, including people who are already qualified for the Invitational.
Correct.
Yeah, so don't discount those people. Everyone counts. What place is he in?
Again, hashtag SCG Premium. Make sure you're following at SCG Live, and we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our quarterfinal round, which is certainly underway.
I mean, relatively speaking, that's a tough one.
It's tougher than we normally do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree, but we'll see if everybody's paying attention at home. Normally, we just go to some stupid card.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that people will get this one wrong. There will be incorrect answers.
Yes. Perfect.
So
That's
pay
exactly
attention.
What I wanted. Yeah.
We talk about this all the time.
Yeah, you thought I bet they thought we were going to say, hey, what's Joe's one-of creature in his blue-white deck that he kills people with?
Yep.
Yeah, it's harder now. You got to earn those 3 months of premium. Just wait for the 12-month question where we ask where we're going to be next weekend, like we always do.
Like we always do.
We'll take a look at sideboards here really quickly. Lossett has a lot of creatures in his board. We'll get to him in just a moment, but David Daniel with a Pithing Needle, Bile Blight, 2 Dark Betrayal, 4 Doomblade, 2 Erebos of the Dead, 1 Read the Bones, and the very obvious 4 copies of Duress.
This is more than most Mono Black Devotion lists bring to the table post-board. David's got a lot of action here for this matchup. The 4 copies of Duress, the 2 copies of Erebos, the Read the Bones, and the Pithing Needle are all great upgrades. He has 6 easy cuts here, 4 copies of Devour Flesh, Bile Blight, Ultimate Price. Now, on the other side of the table, you see what Joe has in his sideboard. This is where things get interesting. Pithing Needle, 3 Archangels, 4 Night Veil Specters, 3 copies of Blind Obedience, 2 Deicide, 2 Dispels. We can discount the Blind Obedience and the Dispel pretty easily. We're going to see Deicide come in, I think, to fight Erebos and Underworld Connections, the Needle for the same cards. What's interesting to me, Joe access to these 7 creatures here. Does he bring them in? Does David respect the possibility of him bringing them in and leaving in some of his creature removal spells?
This is a situation right now where if I'm at the table and I'm David Daniel, I'm giving my opponent a good hard look, and I'm not really sideboarding too much because it's pretty obvious what I'm going to bring in, which are these discard spells. But, you know, I'd probably give Joe the old stare down, watch how he sideboards, because a lot of players don't just sideboard in the 15 and then pull 15 cards out. So if Joe goes reaching for 8 cards, I've got a pretty good idea of, okay, 7 creatures and maybe, you know, a Deicide or 2.
I think in this situation, Joe's probably shuffling in 15.
I would hope so.
You know, there's so many different ways that he can go. To me, Night Veil Spectre seems excellent for this matchup.
Loving this matchup.
Not a big fan of Archangel so as much, especially since David has Lifebane Zombie, but that card still might be good enough here. And we've seen Joe go to it time and time again. We know that David's not touching Hero's Downfall because even if Joe doesn't convert into some creature package, it still provides utility against the Planeswalkers. To me, the big question is, what are you doing with this Ultimate Price, this Bile Blight, and these 4 Devour Flushes? I feel the way that David's sideboard is set up, he has almost no choice but to just continue down the path he set up here. He has to take out his creature removal spells, bringing in his card advantage sources. But he does run the risk of Joe running away with a creature if Joe brings them in his draws the right way.
And one thing we've seen from Joe, both at the Invitational when I was watching him last weekend in Columbus and this weekend here in Las Vegas, is Archangel of Thune seems to come in a lot for him. He just likes transitioning into that plan.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see him do that again here. It might not be optimal, but it certainly throws your opponent for a loop if they leave in their removal or not. It's a real decision that Daniel needs to make. Of course, Hero's Downfall is going to be good no matter what, but you're going to be able to overload those pretty easily.
And oddly enough, this is one of those situations where having access to your opponent's deck list makes sideboarding more challenging, not less.
Yeah.
If this was a Swiss round, I'm sure David already has his plan. I'm cutting my 6 creature removal spells and maybe, I don't know, a Grey Merchant and a Desecration Demon or something like that to bring in these 8 cards. Now that he knows what Joe is bringing to the table or what angles of attack Joe has access to, makes it much harder.
You know, the big card, though, in Joe's sideboard, ignoring these creatures for a moment, is Deicide. Erebos is a great tool against blue-white control, and you know, before, blue-white did have Revoke Existence and some other options, but Deicide is such a clean answer, instant speed, and gets rid of all of those Ereboses.
It's a big upgrade on that slot, certainly. Yeah. Not a lot of artifacts that get played in Standard.
Not yet.
You see the occasional Pithy Needle against blue-white control, but
it is one answer to Darksteel Ingot.
That is true.
Take that, Adrian.
Take that, Adrian. Get out of here.
I think Adrian currently off to a really nice start in Grand Prix Chicago. And we got off to an 8-0 start, so.
He's been posting just steady results with that blue-white deck for the better part of 6 months now. I mean, that deck's a labor of love. You know, we joke about it all the time. You just don't show up to the tournament one day with one Azorius Key Room or one Darksteel Ingot. He works on that deck quite a bit and has had some steady performances. Nearly top-8'd the Open in Columbus last weekend, losing to Owen Turtenwald in the final Swiss round.
Yep.
A finals appearance. I think another top-8 scattered around this year.
It's been a good run for Adrian for the past couple of months. We can't forget as well, when we were in Milwaukee, lost the finals there with blue-white control to mono black. So it's kind of funny, you know, you don't think of him as kind of the, you know, end-all be-all, but he's the guy who's just been right on the cusp of wins with that deck. You know, he's either losing playing for top 8 or losing in the finals of something with blue-white.
So consistent.
Yeah.
Adrian, I think, like decks that are on either end of the spectrum. I think he likes to beat down quite a bit, and he likes to really control the game.
True.
But I think playing cards with Palakronos really isn't Adrian's language.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't blame
him. Mid-rangey cards.
Yeah, it's not my speed either. I mean, if I didn't play mono red, it would definitely be a deck like Joe's, and no Domrys for me, thanks.
Yeah, well, Ohio, unfortunately, I was raised in the monsters of the mid-range. So
that's a thing out there?
Yeah, I was taught how to play mid-range Magic at an early stage in my life. Many an Arc Slogger and Molder Slug cast in my life, man. A destructive flow.
The Bordas, the Opalkas.
Yeah, I'd been
yeah.
mid-range from the start. Looks like Josh Granado is up a game here over Juan Rodriguez. Junk up a game over Jund.
Not surprising. To me, that's the most lopsided matchup that we have in the elimination rounds.
Yeah, it seems like a tough one there for Juan. Kevin Rand did win his match over Nathan Calvin, so Mono Red Aggro is moving on, and this could be a 3rd Standard Open in a row for Mono Red.
Yep, and 3 really distinctly different lists, too.
Yeah.
We had a Fnatic and Mogus list in Columbus. We had Tom Ross with a 17-land build, and now we see Kevin Rand here kind of splitting the difference between the 2 decks.
Kevin's really hoping that David Daniel wins because he's on that side of the bracket. I don't think he wants anything to do with blue-white control.
Joe's list is, I don't know. I think either side of it's fine. I guess the Black Devotion list is better for him.
Time to fire for Thoughtseize here from Daniel. See a quick start here. Got a couple of lands, Mutavault among them, and now a Thoughtseize. Going to take a look at Lossett's hand. You see a Dissolve, a Syncopate, a Night Veil Spectre. And once Daniel does lay those out again, I'm going to tell you exactly all the contents here in Lossett's hand. He's going to go one by one, and we'll do the same here with the Dissolve. There's an Elspeth. You see a Syncopate. Night Veil Spectre will be the next card that Daniel does write down. And it looks like 2 copies of Jace over there as well. So time to select a card.
This is the charm of playing with Thoughtseize, right? You get to touch your opponent's cards.
Yeah.
You get to look at them, decide which one you like the least.
Perhaps bend one.
Yeah, bend one, rip a sleeve.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Night Veil Spectre going to bite the dust. Just be sure not to let Gerard touch your cards on the Thoughtseize.
No.
Big mistake.
Absolutely not.
Mutavault plus Pack Rat coming to the red zone, so an attack there for 4. Lossett going to go down to 16. Going to leave the top card on top, so a timely draw.
Probably land number 4. I mean, he's got to keep that at least.
It's a pretty quick top there for Joe,
Yeah.
so.
I would imagine it's either Detention Sphere or land number 4.
It's like how this game is going right now if you're David Daniel. Going to play a Temple. Oddly enough, not opting to play Erebos this turn. It felt like a perfect turn actually to play Erebos. Feels like you're taking a turn off to do so.
Well, I think he wants to make a rat this turn, and next turn he gets the sequence of Duress plus Erebos, which is really nice too.
Here is Jace. That's going to take down. So Lossett looking for more lands. There's a Plains, a Temple, and a Detention Sphere. Sphere's on its own.
Feel like Joe needs mana, but he also needs the Detention Sphere, so pretty good split here from David.
Yeah, Sphere's a good take. Those lands are going to go to the bottom. We know Lossett doesn't have a ton of those. So Daniel is going to activate Pack Rat. Another one will be coming into play in just a moment.
This is really nice. This turn, David's going to be able to split up his attackers, take down Chase, deal damage to Joe, take his best card, resolve Erebos. I mean, just a great curve thus far from David.
I've seen worse turns. This is a Duress. You can take that D-Sphere that Joe was very clearly valuing highly. Yeah, and there that goes. You see Lossett's hand again, and Elspeth. A Dissolve, a Syncopate, and another copy of Jace. Daniel gonna slide his land over. Looks like he's got the intention of playing another land this turn. Could continue down this Pack Rat road if he'd like.
It's really risky if Joe finds Supreme Verdict. That's kind of the reason I like getting Erebos into play. It's still a lot of pressure. I mean, next turn, if nothing happens, David can activate Pack Rat and maybe get to his devotion count. But it's a big risk, I think, for David to not deploy this turn because he really risks a Detention Sphere or a Supreme Verdict ruining everything for him.
Yeah, I just want to kind of deploy Erebos when the shields are down. But you see Daniel's doing some math right now. Yep. And so he says 2 to Jace, 2 to you. So that's going to go down to 13.
Now, the other side of that equation is that if David makes a Pack Rat and splits his attackers that way, then he has Joe dead next turn, theoretically. But
there's a Supreme Verdict to kind of blow that strategy up. So a Pack Rat was the draw there for Daniel. And now he's just going to play Pack Rat again. So he is very much all in on the Pack Rat plan here.
Yeah, he's leaving himself with very little left in the chamber now. Joe's post-board setup is so counterspell heavy that I don't mind that necessarily, but he is really risking some draws here from Joe, specifically Detention Sphere and Supreme Verdict.
See, Jade's going to come down. Get a minus here. So Goblet Shrine, Island, and Aetherling. Seems like a bit of an identity crisis to me about exactly what Daniel wants to do. For example, if you're trying to go after the opponent's life total, you can kind of ignore Jace and get aggressive that way too. We'll see if he wants to do that on this, upcoming turn.
Well, right now there's so many cards in Joe's deck that are tough on David that he can't let him look at 3 cards. If you were playing around like the 1 Aetherling or something like that at this point, but there's a lot of Detention Spheres, a lot of copies of Supreme Verdict.
And now Daniel has to decide if he's going to activate this Pack Rat, and if so, what's he going to discard? The hand right now here is Downfall and Erebos. Hero's Downfall certainly has some value.
Yeah, these 2 cards feel close in value to me. I guess I would err on the side of the 3-mana spell because you make it in a spot where you Hero's Downfall and attack with Mutavault.
The problem I have here, the line of play is whatever. If this is what he wants to do, this is what he wants to do.
Yeah.
But I think if you're committed to this line, like, I wouldn't be thinking about what card I'm going to discard. I already know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, sure.
That's the thing. Like, if I play Pack Rat on that turn instead of Erebos, it's like, okay, I'm going to play Pack Rat, I'm going to discard and move forward. My opponent has the ability to do these things with 4 mana, and you don't have to think. I don't think a lot has changed that he has to think about his decision. I think he could play the variables in his head already if this is the line he wants to go down.
Now, what's really compelling here is that David has just drawn Devour Flesh, which means he's sideboarded in some fashion to protect himself from Joe's creatures. Exactly how, maybe he cut Desecration Demon altogether. He's not very good in the matchup, but he's left in some creature removal.
Mutavault looks like it's going to take down Jace, and these rats are going to come across here for 8 points of damage, so that's going to go down to 5.
And here it is. I mean, Joe needs to draw this turn
There are definitely some big draws.
Oh,
I think
he
that was the
found
detention
it.
sphere, yeah.
I mean, he's still got to answer a Mutavault here, but this is step one.
You see Joe going to take his time, make sure he does everything correctly. There is D-Sphere to get rid of these rats.
You see David's frustration here. I mean, he took some risks with this line. He needed one draw step to miss, and it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is discarding Devour Flesh would certainly make sense. I guess the mana was already tapped. He could have, Devour Fleshed himself, depending on what the sphere targets. But, of course, he attacked with Mutavault, so it's understandable why that line of play wouldn't be available. Lossett going to draw a card. It looks like it's a copy of Temple of Enlightenment.
And can Joe answer this Mutavault?
Take a look at the top card. That goes to the bottom very, very quickly. Lossett with 4 mana. I think this may be a Jace. It looks like it is. Ticking up is certainly a nice option. That's exactly what he will do. See if Daniel's going to fire off a Hero's Downfall. The answer is no. Draws a copy of... Looks like it may have been a Bile Blight.
He's left in a lot of creature removal.
Yeah. Now, Bile Blight, of course, does take care of Mutavaults on Joe's side as well as Nightfell Spectre, but, these are the draws where Daniel's hoping for discard or more proactive stuff right now.
Well, he clearly shows a lot of respect for Joe's ability to decide into a creature deck here. And now he's kind of catching this end of it where it's challenging for him, A lot of creature removal he's drawing.
There's your trigger. Lossett looks like he's going to go down to 2. So barely hanging on. And now here's Hero's Downfall, perhaps. Yep. Now the shields are down here for Daniel. Let's see if Lossett can find a good one. Looks like a copy of Deicide is what he found.
And now, oddly enough, that Bile Blight in David's hand, if Joe taps out for Elspeth, he's going to die to that Bile Blight.
Yeah, that is rather ironic. And Elspeth is something that would seem relatively safe after sideboard.
Yeah.
I can play this in 3 tokens. I'm good to go. So here are 3 soldiers, but the truth is that's not the truth at all. Daniel going to very quickly attack. There's Bile Blight, activate Mutavault, and kill you. So that Bile Blight that he left in, very, very helpful. And that plan of moving forward with Pack Rat, able to get the job done here for David Daniel, ties things up.
And now, I think that if I'm in Joe's seat, having seen Devour Flesh, having seen Bile Blight, I'm shuffling in 15, and every creature is removed from my deck except for Aetherling. That's where I go from here.
Now we'll see if Joe wants to change things up. With these creatures in the sideboard, 4 Nightfell Spectres, 3 Archangels, and your opponent clearly has left in removal. We saw Devour Flesh. Bile Blight isn't the biggest tip-off, but Devour Flesh is a huge tip-off.
Yeah, at this point, there's no other argument to be made here, David's respecting your creature plan. He's left in a lot of inefficient cards to fight against it, and your creatures probably aren't that valuable. You can play the game 1 plan if you want to, Just have this mono black player glut with removal spells in their hand. I would love to see what Joe has in his 15 right now.
Yeah, we're going to find out here as this game does progress. But quick updates on other matches very quickly. Kevin Rand does defeat Nathan Calvin, so Mono Red Aggro wins 2-0 over Black Green Devotion. He will play the winner of this match between Joe Lossett and David Daniel. They'll be getting their 3rd game in just a moment. But on the other side of the bracket, we've got Philip Martin and Keith Selden. That's Jund Monsters versus Blue White Control, respectively. They're in game number 3. And you've got Josh Granado playing Junk in game number 2, up 1 against Juan Rodriguez, playing Jund Monsters. So pretty diverse top 8, all things considered. You've got a Junk deck. You've got 2 copies of Jund Monsters, 2 Blue-White Control, 2 copies of Black-Green Devotion, and Red Aggro. What's missing here? I'm trying to think. Anything?
Those are the big ones.
Ah, Mono Blue.
Mono Blue.
Mono Blue's the one.
And what's interesting, no knee-jerk reaction decks. No main deck Fiendslayer Paladins, no main deck Boros Reckoner type of stuff going on here.
Yeah.
The sideboards are way different in this tournament. I mean, you see more Drown in Sorrows and, Fiendslayer Paladin that we just alluded to. There's more of that going on, but you aren't seeing things like main deck Unflinching Courage in this tournament, in the top 8 at least. So things have changed, but they have not gone haywire in light of Tom Ross's invitational win.
Well, game number 3 will begin here shortly. If you are just joining us this evening, we do appreciate you. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star Stadium's Open Series here in Las Vegas at SCG Live. Hashtag SCGVEGAS for your tweets to close this night out. We've made it through 10 rounds of Swiss Magic, as usual nowadays for the Open Series. They're almost always 10 rounders. And we're in our quarterfinals right now. Joe Lossett, number 3 on our Season 2 leaderboard, making a climb this weekend.
This tournament, tomorrow, the Legacy Open, Portland 7 days from now, these are going to be the determining tournaments, I think, for Season 3.
Yeah.
If Joe gets enough traction, I think he's going to start traveling to a lot of events.
He's got a big game in front of him right now, though.
Yeah. And a really tough decision. It's not just about what's happening when the match starts here, but how exactly does he want his deck built is compelling all to its own. If I'm in his seat, all the non-Aether Link creatures are out of the deck.
I think the other thing that's really interesting here as well is the way that David Daniel played that game. You know, his play style showing that I am moving in with Pack Rat.
Very aggressive.
You know, so you can maybe base your decisions on how you want to play, given that, okay, my opponent very clearly values Pack Rat very highly, where I was talking about how I would play Erebos. So I value being able to play a longer game using my life total as a resource and drawing a bunch of cards, where it looks like Daniel's approach may have been better that game.
Yeah. I mean, Joe top-decked an answer to Pack Rat and still lost. So that's a pretty compelling defense of the line of play that David took.
Also just shows the power of Mutavault.
Yes, it's a good one against all sorts of decks, especially blue, white, and Esper.
Let's start with a couple of temples to begin in Temple of Enlightenment. Daniel, just a swamp, no discard just yet, but he might be just waiting on when he wants to fire some off, as firing it off on turn 1, not all that important.
You want to set it up sometimes to set up some combo plays, you know. Make you discard and then try to push something through.
It's time for a Pack Rat. We've seen this before, and we are certainly going to see it again here. Daniel's hand pretty good. 2 copies of Underworld Connections, a Duress hanging out over there as well. Devour Flesh. And the off chance that Lossett does have a Nightveil Spectre, which he does. So David Daniel coming ready. Saw another Pack Rat to draw. See if Daniel wants to fire off Devour Flesh right now. Looks like he's going to lead out with Duress. So Lossett will have to reveal the hand. There's a Temple of Deceit. The other cards here, though, Celestial Flare. A few others. Look like there's a Deicide hanging out there, too. You can see Daniel going to record this information. Much like last time, you also see a Detention Sphere, and I believe a Jace as well. So pretty good hand there for Joe, but his best card may get taken, and it looks like that best card may be Jace.
And from what we saw from David here, I mean, there's an opening here for him to take Detention Sphere and just go straight to the Pack Rat plan.
Yeah, just move right on in.
Yep.
We saw him take risks like that in the last game. Well, he will go with the Architect of Thought. So down goes Jace. Leaving Lossett with Detention Sphere. Now here is Devour Flesh, taking care of Nightveil Spectre, followed up with Attack for 1.
This is what I alluded to before with Joe. Given what you saw of David Game 2, I don't think these creatures are going to be worth very much.
Temple of Deceit. Leaves the top card on top rather quickly. And Lossett just going to pass the turn back. Pithing Needle the draw. That one could be important down the road. And Daniel with a Read the Bones, too.
Read the Bones, one up in the sideboard, and excellent this turn. David doesn't really want to tap out for an Underworld Connections and just have it get thrown away by the Deicide. So this is a much better use of his turn.
So now it's time to take a look a little bit here, and then peel 2.
Yeah, swap it to rest.
Hard to say no.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
There is that swamp. And here comes that Duress. So Lossett's going to have to reveal the hand again. There's a D-Sphere, a Flare, a Deicide, and a Temple of Enlightenment. What this means probably is that David Daniel can't attack this turn. If he takes Flare, sure he can, but you take Flare, then you have a problem against the Sphere.
I think David's fine playing this kind of waiting game right now. He can set up, you know, just take the Detention Sphere, start Pack Ratting, and attack when he feels up to it. Or in spots where Joe taps out.
Looks like Joe may have drawn a copy of Jay's top card here. Gonna go to the bottom. Yeah, Lossett did pick up another copy of Architect of Thought. The question is, does he want to deploy it? And if so, how does he want to use it?
Well, if he minuses, it's dead on board to a Pack Rat activation. But maybe Joe's happy with David spending a turn that way. And Joe needs resources. I mean, he's low on stuff that matters right now. A removal spell, a DSID has no guarantee is going to be any good. So I like minusing here.
Yep, just let's use it as a divination, right?
Yeah.
Also, getting by this land seems to be pretty important. Obviously, he didn't know those were on top of the deck, but getting by these seems to be pretty nice.
This is great for Joe. I mean, 3 bad draw steps, and he gets 2 lands, which he could use as well. So it looks like an anemic reveal, but I'm sure Joe's thrilled.
Plains to the bottom, other lands to the grip. I imagine we're going to see Jace bite the dust here. It could be needled as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways for him to answer it if he's feeling so inclined. I mean, he can needle, he can play connections this turn. He can also just attack Jace down to 1 and deal with it next turn. So a lot of different lines of play.
Another copy of Pack Rat here too for Daniel. At what point does he want to get Underworld Connections online?
Yeah, he's gone away entirely from the card advantage routes in his post-board games, which has been pretty interesting to see.
That's what we normally see. Get the job done against blue-white control is that Mono Black Devotion basically saying, hey, I can keep up with you on cards. And the things that I find, chances are will be better than what you find because of my discard. Maybe it will be time to deploy the connections. And actually, it's okay. Again, we saw this before. He's going to discard Erebos, get into Jace, pass the turn back.
He knows he's playing against a bunch of copies of Deicide, so you have to respect this line of play, you know?
Yeah.
He's just not going to spend his entire turn running an enchantment out there. This is interesting stuff. I've never seen a Black Devotion player take these kind of lines post-board. And he won, he won the game in question where even though he took some risks, Joe drew one of the cards to punish him, he still pulled it out. And this game is shaping up pretty nicely for him as well.
Quick update here for you guys. Keith Selden does defeat Philip Martin, blue-white control, defeating Jund Monsters, waiting for the winner of the Junk versus Jund Monsters matchup. There's another Jace. This is going to tick up this time. See Daniel looking through the grid saying, how many Jaces is that? All right, fine. Well done. A Mutavault to draw there. That seems to be a pretty important one.
And now, David again can needle the Jace, animate his Mutavault, make a rat. I mean, he can apply a lot of pressure this turn.
Yeah, I mean, he can also just kill Jace outright, too. Play Mutavault, activate it, activate rat. That's an attack there for 8. With the 2 Jace triggers, makes an attack for 6. The needle play is actually pretty compelling, though.
Yes. Given how aggressive David's been in these lines of play, it wouldn't surprise me for him to go down that road.
Heck, we could also see Underworld Connections on a swamp and then activate. Well, yeah, we're just going to move in this way. Playing a Pack Rat. One could argue better than activating Pack Rat. Saving some mana that way. The thing that may end up hurting here, though, for Daniel is that if Joe draws a Verdict or a Detention Sphere, he can just clear out the rats.
Yes.
And, if Daniel had decided to instead maybe activate Pack Rat, discarding one of those Underworld Connections. And so that Mutavault's going to be summoning sick, so that's what they're mentioning. Yeah, you can tap a swamp, but can't use the Mutavault. But back to my original point that if he had discard Underworld Connections instead, because now Joe could very easily draw an answer to this, clean out all the rats, and that's a Deed Sphere right there. Yeah. That's huge. Now Daniel doesn't have a great way to, restart. It's got to be with connections. That's going to take a little while.
Yeah, he's gonna have to grind back up, and we know that Joe can answer the first one.
Yeah, even has the mana available to do so.
This might be a really slow grind.
Timely draw of Thoughtseize, however, there for Daniel. You know that Needle's name when you get a second, Jesse. And there is the discard spell. Flare and Deicide.
I imagine that Needle was set to Elspeth Sun's champion based on the way he's played this game, and that's where it's at.
Taking a look at Deicide here. Wants to make sure he knows exactly what it does, and it doesn't kill all the Underworld Connections, only kills one. It's the Erebus you have to be worried about. Now Daniel has to rebuild the game now, and this is the situation where he gets a little bit, he gets in trouble if Joe draws a copy of Sphinx of Revelation off the top.
Well, Joe doesn't have a lot of ways to really punish him from this spot. I mean, it's that Aetherling's a bad draw for him, but with Elspeth shut off, that's one of the more common ways Joe would punish him from here. He's got some time to work with.
Connections activation again here for Daniel. Now there's a Desecration Demon, something that Joe has to answer right away. You see the Supreme Verdict there in Lossett's hand, however. Lossett draws. Not quite sure what that one is. Looks like it may have been a Mutavault, so he's going to put that into play. And I wouldn't be surprised if we just see Verdict trade with the Demon, but Joe willing to take a hit here. Ah, he does have the Flare. I do take that back.
Yeah.
Daniel going to activate again. The card advantage engine is certainly online now.
He's drawn a Bile Blight. I mean, he's left in a lot of creature removal.
Mutavault going to fire up. There's a Demon Trigger. In there we go. Lossett going to attempt to block with his Mutavault. And there's a Hero's Downfall to get that off of the table. See if he wants to cast a Flare. I imagine he does. So there's a Flare to take care of the Mutavault. That's actually a good exchange there for Joe because Mutavault being off the table matters.
Though, that was very nice of David there. He knew that Joe could trade Mutavaults and then still inside of combat after damage, Celestial Flare away the Demon.
Now Joe drew a nice one. Joe drew Aetherling.
But that might be, can he take a turn off here?
I think he may have to.
He can cast Aetherling and hope to Supreme Verdict the following turn, but then Duress is a live draw. You reverse it, Duress doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like Aetherling is the kind of card that you have to play right now and try to steal it.
Yep.
That's what he's going to try to do. So Daniel's going to untap. He is at 13. There is the Duress that you mentioned. As Josh Granado wins his match 2-0, he'll be playing against Keith Selden tomorrow morning. Junk versus Blue Eye Control on one side of the bracket. Kevin Rand playing Mono Red, going to play the winner of this. And this is a close one.
Yeah, there was some timely top decks on both sides here. I mean, Joe might still just go 8 damage, win the game here, but we know David's brought in so much creature removal that may not be possible.
There's Duress. Takes care of the Verdict. Demon Trigger on in for 6. As that goes down to 8. You see Daniel's hand. You mentioned the creature removal. 2 copies of Bile Blight there. But David Daniel's going to play an Underworld Connections before passing the turn back over to Joe Lossett. Lossett will take a draw.
If he finds a removal spell for this Demon, he's way ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got to be right now.
There's the attack for 8. Daniel's going to go down to 5. Unless that just has to pass the turn back. Will Daniel activate Connections?
These Bile Blades don't entirely protect David. I mean, he still takes some damage.
I need to confirm. I think he may be at 5, Jesse. Cool. Thank you. Down at 2.
I can't remember the last game I've seen in this kind of matchup that was this close.
Yeah.
I mean, it rarely is a damage race like this.
But that's what David Daniels turned it into.
Yeah.
He's turned it into a damage race. Lossett draws a card. Didn't get a great look at it. There's a Hallowed Fountain. Looks like it may have been a Nightveil Spectre. That's not at its best right now. I think Joe is going to consider playing this pre-combat for Devour Flesh. But he may be giving away some information by tapping that mana right now.
Although he was a little fidgety with his mana last turn when he had nothing.
Yeah.
So Joe will throw out signals like that from time to time. This has been impressive to watch from David. I've never really seen someone approach this matchup from the lines he's been taking.
In we go. Bile Blight. Gonna make Aetherling into a 1 toughness creature. Excuse me, 1 power creature. Becomes a 1/2 now. Effectively playing the role of Fog.
This is still not lethal. David can kill the Nightveil Spectre next turn. Joe still can sack the Aetherling. So he'll likely get one more look at it.
Hey, so that's fine. No reason to blink. So you may pump this now. It's to 2-1. Now Daniel's going to go down to 2, which will cut off the Underworld Connections activations. All this I can do is pass. If I'm Joe, I would like to play that land.
Just
in
maximize.
case. Yeah, if it's a rev, it's okay. You know, he goes from 2 to 7 if it's a rev.
And I don't think he's bluffing anything at this point. I don't think David believes anything.
That's Bile Blight. And that takes care of Nightveil Spectre. Demon Trigger on the stack. There goes Aetherling.
David's on 1. Joe still with plenty of draws here.
Yeah, the big problem here, if Joe draws a rev, he dies from damage. And rev is one of his best draws. What does he pick up there? It's a Nightveil Spectre. That's on chump blocking duty. I still think you got to play that land. There we go.
Yeah.
Daniel draws a card. Removal spell will get the job done. That's going to bite the dust. All he can do is play a land. He can't activate Underworld Connections. Big draw here from Joe. I think it was just a temple. He passes the turn back, and that's all that it was. And David Daniels going to win this match over Joe Lossett. 2-1. Mono Black Devotion moving on, and he is thrilled with a big win there.
That was some really, I mean,